All jobs involve hazards, and roof tiling is no exception. So you need to know how to keep yourself safe at work. This DVD is designed to help you do that. To start with, it's important to know your responsibilities. The law states that everyone on a worksite has a general duty of care to themselves and each other. This means you are responsible for keeping yourself and others safe. That includes other workers and the public. One way to do this is to make sure you do not work if you're affected by drugs, including prescriptions and alcohol. Of course, no illegal drugs or alcohol is ever allowed on site. Keeping everyone safe also means not taking part in fighting, intimidation, bullying or harassment. If you see any unsafe behaviours like these, report them to your supervisor or, if necessary, talk to your state's safety body, such as WorkSafe or WorkCover. Remember, you are responsible for your own safety and the safety of others. Do not work if you are affected by drugs or alcohol. Report unsafe behaviour. Consider this. What would you do if you felt another worker was bullying you? How would you contact your state's safety body? You can prevent many problems by being prepared. Check your equipment regularly to make sure it's in good working order. Make sure your electrical leads and hand tools have been tagged and tested within the last 3 months. This is a legal requirement. Some builders require monthly testing, so always check the site contractor's requirements. You should have a working portable residual current device, or RCD unit, in case the worksite has no earth leakage protection. This also needs to be tagged every 3 months and tested every day. Equipment such as ladders and tile elevators must be in good working order, suitable for the job, and comply with Australian standards. Look for damage, missing guards and other hazards daily. Repair or replace any damaged or defective equipment. An often overlooked piece of equipment is your first aid kit. All tiling teams must have a first aid kit on site, and if possible, a trained and qualified first aider. The first aid kit has to be readily available, not buried in the back of a van or ute. Check the contents of the first aid kit to make sure it's complete and up to date. You don't want to find out you're missing bandages after you've hurt yourself. Some states may have specific requirements about the type and contents of the first aid kit you use. You can ask your supervisor or your government's work safety body about this. Weather conditions may affect your safety while you are working on a roof. Working on a wet or icy roof can cause you to slip or slide. Wind can blow you off a roof. Check the weather conditions before you leave for the job, and then again before you start the job. Take care in hot and sunny weather so that you don't burn, overheat or dehydrate. You should wear a hat and sunglasses, apply sunscreen and drink plenty of water. A fire extinguisher should be available for use on site. Make sure that it's up to date and operational. When you receive a job, you can double check that a risk assessment has been conducted and all necessary controls, such as guardrails, are in place, ready for the tiling job to be started. And of course, anyone performing construction work must have a safety card that shows they have completed a recognised general safety induction training course. Remember, check your tools and equipment for damage or defects. Make sure electrical equipment is tagged and tested. Have an up-to-date and complete first aid kit. Know the weather forecast and whether there's a fire ban in force. Prepare yourself for the weather conditions. Consider this. What would you do if you arrived at a job to find there were no guardrails on a roof 4 metres high? How do you get your electrical equipment tested and tagged? What do you have in your first aid kit? Working safely starts as soon as you arrive at the worksite. Park your vehicle so that you don't cause a hazard for others. Don't obstruct other workers or private driveways. Everyone who turns up for work must be fit for work. That means they should not be affected by alcohol or drugs of any kind. Workers who are too tired or drug affected are hazardous to work with. Before you even unload your equipment, do warm-up exercises. Like an athlete, your body is your main piece of equipment. Taking care of it, such as by stretching your muscles, makes your body more flexible and helps protect you from injury. Stretch before you start work and through the day. It can be very difficult to control access to residential building sites. Often other trades need access, and members of the public may wander onto the site to look at the home being built. That's why warning signs must be displayed. Put safety signs in clear public view so that anyone entering the site is alerted, and never allow children or animals onto the site. For larger or commercial sites, you may have to follow sign-in procedures and undergo a site-specific induction. Signing in helps make people aware that you are there so they know not to work beneath you. The induction alerts you to things like any hazards specific to the site, emergency procedures, hazard reporting, and any unusual conditions. Before you start work, conduct a risk assessment with a site safety checklist. This should be done every day, even after the site supervisor has cleared the site for tiling. Sometimes, hazards are introduced to the site overnight, such as when deliveries of building materials are placed close to the roof line. The risk assessment should include things like toilet facilities, power, water availability, no other trades on site, adequate site access, and full protection in place. Hazards can be dealt with according to the Safe Work Method Statement, or SWMS Guide. Where hazards are beyond your capability to control, contact your supervisor, the builder or site supervisor for further advice. Don't start work until the risk is controlled to an acceptable level agreed to by you and the site supervisor. Record information from the induction and risk assessment in a Job Safety Analysis, JSA, or Safe Work Method Statement. This is where you indicate the control measures you will use for the hazards you have identified on this specific site. Everyone in attendance must sign off on the JSA or SWMS. One common hazard control is scaffolding. There are very specific rules about when scaffolding is required and how it should be erected or constructed. For example, there must be an access ladder that extends at least 1 metre beyond the step-off point, and scaffolding at or above 2 metres must be fitted with rigid guardrails and kickboards. It's important that you know your state's regulations about when and how scaffolding is erected, so you can recognise if there are any problems. Before you start the job, you should plan ahead to avoid hazards. This includes deciding on the best work layout so that you reduce the amount of manual handling you do and your exposure to trip and slip hazards. One extremely dangerous hazard to be aware of is power lines. Overhead power lines must have a 4-metre clearance from your work areas. Tiger tails must be fitted to power lines or the power turned off if the work area is closer than 4 metres. Always position battens away from power lines. When other controls aren't practical, personal protective equipment, known as PPE, will have to be used. SWMS explain when PPE must be used for each roofing task. You must make sure your PPE is always ready in case you need it. Wear non-slip footwear when working on the roof. However, if this footwear becomes wet or muddy, it may lose its traction. You might also track mud to the roof, making the roof slippery for others. To avoid this, you may need to wear safety boots while you are not on the roof. Protect yourself from the sun with sunscreen, sun hats and sunglasses. Eye protection guards your eyes against dust and other airborne particles, such as from hammering, grinding and nail gun use. These jobs require safety glasses, not ordinary sunglasses. Safety glasses can be tinted for UV protection. You need earmuffs when you use power saws, especially if you're cutting metal. You may need hearing protection when you use an angle grinder, some nail guns and petrol motors, or if another worker nearby is using one of these. Wear gloves to protect your hands from broken tile edges, which can be razor sharp, and to avoid scrapes from rough concrete tiles, such as when loading tiles onto the elevator. If you have to use a grinder to cut tiles, wear a dust mask. A safety helmet or hard hat is needed if designated on the work site. If there is a risk of falling tools or materials, workers below may need to wear head protection. It's very unusual for you to need to use a harness, as scaffolding or handrails are generally enough to protect you. However, for small maintenance work, when no other methods are reasonably practical, a harness may be your last resort. For all PPE, you must check daily for defects and replace faulty equipment immediately. Make sure you know if smoking is permitted on the building site, and if so, where it is permitted. Smoking is never allowed in enclosed areas, such as buildings, and you can't smoke if flammable substances, like solvent-based paints and glues, are being used. Of course, smoking is never permitted when refueling is taking place. Very few chemicals are used in roof tiling. Most can be safely stored and handled, as long as you understand how they can be hazardous. Common hazardous chemicals used in tiling are cement, adhesives and sealants, rock wool insulation, some lubricants and grease. You can find information about the storage, handling, use and disposal of hazardous chemicals in material safety data sheets, or MSDSs, for each hazardous chemical. These must be available on-site for any hazardous chemical used on-site. You must always follow the safety precautions found on the chemical containers and in the MSDSs. If you've handled chemicals, wash your hands before eating. Don't modify or reuse chemical containers and get rid of them according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Remember, park safely. Do warm-up exercises. Put up your safety signs. Conduct a risk assessment and make sure all hazards are controlled. Plan your work so that you reduce manual handling and slip or trip hazards. Check your PPE for faults and make sure it is ready for when you need it. Make sure you have an MSDS for any hazardous chemical you use. If you've handled chemicals, wash your hands before eating. Consider this. What would you do if one of your workmates arrived for work affected by alcohol? Why do risk assessments have to be completed every day? Where can you find information about storing, handling or disposing of chemicals? Before you all start work, it's important to be sure that risk assessments have been completed and everyone is aware of any hazards and how they will be controlled. When the team is deciding what tasks each employee will do, it's important that everyone has been suitably trained for the jobs they are given. Unload your equipment safely, watching out for power lines as you lift and set up equipment such as ladders and elevators. Manual handling is a major source of injuries for roof tilers. This includes any lifting, lowering, pushing, pulling, holding or restraining. One way to prevent injuries is to reduce the manual handling you do in the job. You can do this by using mechanical aids to assist you wherever possible. Where manual handling must be done, assess the task before you start. Plan the move, check the weight of the load, and check that your path is free of obstacles. Stand close to the load with your feet apart for greater stability. Bend your knees and keep a straight back. Hold the load firmly and close to your body. Lift smoothly and move your feet to turn, being careful not to twist. And be careful not to create a tripping hazard when you put things down. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, and consider making 2 or 3 easier trips instead of one big one. Ladders are important pieces of equipment that must be used safely. Make sure the ones you use are industrial standard. When you set one up, choose a safe place. Remember, regulations require a clearance of 4 metres from power lines. Keep the setup area clear of equipment and materials so you do not trip or slip. Make sure the ladder's base is stable, especially if the soil is soft or uneven. Estimate the distance from the ground to the surface the ladder will lean against. Place the feet of the ladder a quarter of that distance away from the wall. The ladder must extend at least 1 metre above the access point at the top. After putting on a gutter guard, if you have one, tie off the ladder and secure it at the top, making sure the feet can't slip. If necessary, remove muddy shoes or boots while at the foot of the ladder and put on clean roof shoes to avoid tracking mud to the roof. It's a statutory requirement that you keep 3-point contact with the ladder when you're using it. Don't lean out to the side or stand on rungs that are less than 900 millimetres from the top. And remember, ladders are for access, they are not work platforms. To help reduce manual handling risks, stand up battens so that they are easy to reach from the roof but not likely to fall and hit others on the ground. Once again, be aware of electrical hazards. You must control manual handling and fall hazards when you're moving things to the roof. It's unsafe to climb a ladder while carrying items on your shoulder because you can't maintain 3 points of contact with the ladder if you're holding something on your shoulder. You may be able to pass materials up to other workers or use a winch or elevator instead. Make sure you look for shadowed areas of the roof that may still be wet from overnight rain, dew or frost. Feel if the roof is dry before you walk on it. Never work on wet glazed terracotta tiles. Allow them to dry first. Remember, use safe manual handling techniques. Use ladders safely. Move materials to the roof safely. Consider this. What are some things you can do to reduce the manual handling you do for your job? If you were unloading a ladder and setting it up, what are some things you would do to assess the manual handling task before you started? Think about how you load items to a roof. How do you control the manual handling and fall hazards? Nearly everything you do when preparing to lay tiles will involve manual handling hazards. Remember, it's important that you plan any move. Check the weight of the load. Check that your path is free of obstacles. Stand close to the load with your feet apart. Bend your knees and keep a straight back. Hold the load firmly and close to your body, and lift smoothly, moving your feet to turn. Any work you do at height involves fall hazards, which is why there are strict requirements for scaffolding and edge protection. If scaffolding or edge protection is missing or inadequate, you must stop work and contact your supervisor, the builder or the site supervisor. There is an increased risk of falling if the truss spacing is greater than 600 millimetres. Consult your SWIMS when working on truss spacing of more than 600 millimetres for extra control measures, such as safety mesh or fall arrest sarking. To minimise the risk of tripping or falling, especially backwards on a roof, always place your feet where the truss and batten intersect. Work from the bottom of the roof upwards, closing gaps as you go. Do not stand on metal fascia. It is not structural and will not support much weight. Do not walk on valley irons, as their surface is very smooth and slippery. Move extension leads and air lines carefully so they do not get snagged or become a trip hazard to yourself or other workers. Handle long battens and sarking carefully as they can act as sails, even in light winds. Power tools such as saws and nail guns carry the risk of electrocution. They must be used carefully and always with earth leakage protection, such as an RCD unit in place. Nail guns introduce hazards such as misfiring and ricocheting nails. Snagged airlines can throw you off balance, knock tools off the roof, or become a trip hazard to others. When using a nail gun, you must be particularly careful to ensure the area below is clear of any other workers and always wear safety glasses. Of course, safety signs must be displayed when nail guns are in use. Electrical supply leads should be protected from damage. Do not drag leads over metal surfaces, such as edge protection. Pull them up through the frame if possible. Elevate electrical leads from the ground away from water and wet areas to avoid electrocution. This also helps avoid dirt and mud being dragged onto the roof, where it can create a slip hazard. Use safe manual handling techniques when moving an elevator. It's generally best to use a two-man lift. An elevator with a winch requires no lifting up and is one of the most effective methods of eliminating this lifting hazard. Make sure others on site can move easily around the elevator. Don't create a trip hazard for others. You face manual handling risks when you load tiles or unload tiles from an elevator. Remember to carry tiles according to safe manual handling principles. In particular, whether you're on the ground or on the roof, carry the stack in front, close to your body. Your site will be limited, which can create a trip hazard, so make sure you plan your move and check for trip hazards before you start. Trolleys can be helpful for use on long, relatively flat roofs. When water is trapped in the wrapping of concrete products, it can become acidic and cause skin burns. Wear PPE, especially gloves, when handling concrete products, and wash your work clothes regularly. If the pallet is damaged or placed on an angle, tiles can be unstable and fall out of their wrapping unexpectedly. Check the tiles before unwrapping them so they do not fall on you. As you load the elevator, check that the worker on the roof is keeping up with your work rate. When you lay tiles, be sure to bend, lift and lower according to safe manual handling principles. Rotating tasks among workers helps you avoid overuse of individual body parts. Make sure everyone learns all tasks so that rotation is possible. Remember to place your feet carefully on the nose of the tiles or where the trusses and battens cross. Work from the bottom up so that there are tiles for you to stand on. Be alert for wet roofs and damp roofs in shadow as they present a slip hazard. Be aware of changing weather conditions. If wind gusts or lightning occur, stop work and do not resume until the storm has passed. Avoid the use of grinders for cutting tiles. They can create a dust which is harmful to breathe, as well as being a slip hazard. Use a tile cutter instead. If you must use a grinder, wear a disposable P1 or P2 respiratory mask and dust-resistant safety eye protection. Eye protection, such as close-fitting safety glasses, protects against any kind of dust being blown in your eyes. This is especially important on windy days. Use a cutting tray to collect waste and reduce slip hazards. You need to dispose of this and any other waste carefully. Tip the waste over the roof edge into a designated area below the gutter line. Make certain that other workers or visitors to the site are at a safe distance when you do this. Remember, ensure adequate scaffolding or edge protection is in place before you start work. Place your feet carefully and work from the bottom of the roof upwards. Use nail guns and other power tools carefully and with the appropriate PPE. Set up the elevator safely. Use safe manual handling techniques when loading, unloading and laying tiles. Use a tile cutter and cutting tray if possible. Tip waste carefully into designated areas. Consider this. What would you do if you realised that the scaffolding at your job was missing a rail? What can you do to control the fall hazards presented by long battens and sarking? What would you do if you were using a nail gun on a roof and you saw a worker enter the area below you? How do you manage the manual handling hazards involved in moving an elevator? How do you manage the different hazards involved in cutting tiles? Cement dust is hazardous if you breathe it in. It can cause coughing and a sore throat soon after it is breathed in, and more dangerous illnesses after long-term exposure, such as asthma-like symptoms and silicosis, which is life-threatening. Read the MSDS for more information about this. Cement mixers and handheld mixers can create dust hazards, so use a mask when mixing mortar. Cement bags can be heavy. When you move them, be sure to follow the general safe manual handling principles already discussed. Manual handling and fall hazards involved in carrying mortar to the roof must also be controlled. Use a winch or send the buckets up on the elevator. Partially filling the buckets with mortar reduces their weight and makes them more manageable. Rubber boots on the bottom of the buckets help to stop them from sliding off the roof. Remember, use a mask when mixing mortar. Move mortar to the roof safely. Use rubber boots on buckets to keep them from sliding. Consider this. If you felt unwell after breathing in cement dust, where would you find information about first aid treatment for this? How do you control the manual handling hazards involved in carrying mortar to the roof? If someone is injured, you should follow some basic injury management procedures. In case there is an emergency, make sure you have the address and phone number of the nearest medical centre, surgery or hospital. The builder's board at the front of the site should have these details. If you can't take yourself to the doctor or hospital, ring 000 or have someone call an ambulance for you. If someone else is injured, make them comfortable until medical attention arrives, but do not move the injured person unless their life is threatened. In the case of an electrical shock, disconnect the power if possible. If the emergency involves a hazardous substance, you may need to look at the product label or MSDS for first aid and emergency advice. Make sure you tell your employer or supervisor about any injuries. They will report notifiable incidents to the safety regulator, such as WorkSafe or WorkCover, in your state. It's important that workers report all accidents and incidents, even near hits or near misses, where no one is hurt. Keeping records of these helps employers identify safety issues and can prevent similar accidents from happening in the future. Remember, look at the builder's board for details of the nearest medical centre or hospital. Report all injuries and incidents. Consider this. Why is it important to report near hits or near misses? Where can you find information about the nearest doctor, surgery or hospital? Before you finish for the day, sweep the roof and clean the gutters. Move carefully so you don't slip or fall. Wear gloves when cleaning out gutters so you don't cut or scratch your hands, and warn others on site before you sweep waste over the edge of the roof. Before you leave, make sure you eliminate any unnecessary hazards. You should remove your ladders, cover holes securely and stack materials safely. When stacking pallets, a 2-man lift is recommended. When you remove your equipment and load your vehicle, you need to control the same manual handling issues as when you were getting the equipment out of the vehicle and up to the roof. You don't want to risk falling off a ladder or hurting your back, so where possible, it's better to pass the equipment down to someone or use the elevator to send it down. Secure the equipment in your vehicle so that it doesn't move while you are driving. Loose equipment can become projectiles if you brake sharply or have an accident. Leave the floor of the building reasonably clean and tidy. Remove your rubbish from the ground and put it into designated rubbish areas. This helps eliminate slip, trip and fall hazards. Remember to keep access and walkways clear for other workers. Domestic rubbish must not be left on site. If waste is recyclable, such as batten offcuts, put it in designated recycling areas. Aim to leave the site as clean as you found it. If the site is gated, secure the site to keep children and others who might wander onto the site out of danger. Remember, wear gloves to clean out gutters. Remove your rubbish and leave the site as clean as you found it. Consider this. Why is it important that you sweep the roof and clean gutters before you leave a job? How do you secure your equipment in your vehicle? What tiling materials can be recycled? You are responsible for protecting your own health and safety, and the health and safety of other people at your work. This includes following safe work procedures for wearing PPE, working safely at heights, and using hazardous substances. Putting safety first means you can enjoy a long and rewarding career as a roof tiler. Remember, it's up to you to keep yourself safe at work. Check your understanding of risks and hazards by watching each case study and seeing how you go at answering the questions. You may want to use your own safety checklist and JSAs or SWIMs to help you with these. You can discuss your answers with your supervisor. Case Study 1. What roof tiling hazards can you identify in the following footage? Case Study 2. Here is a tiler conducting a risk assessment. Which of the hazards he identifies is he responsible for controlling?
First things first, scaffold, insufficient at the back and front, needs to be propped up more. Clear access, no, that ain't there. Do we have a toilet on site? No, I don't think so. We've got bricklayers here, that's not really good as a safety hazard. And the pitch of the roof is over 26, so I don't know what I'm going to do about it.
Case Study 3. Look at this footage and decide how you would control each of the hazards shown.